went to combat, we did this thing, and then we came home, we trained well. It was this amazing success. Well, then 10 years later, I'm hearing about suicides and broken homes and destroyed lives and combat deaths. And I realized, I mean, for the very first time, I realized I still have a responsibility to help these guys. I don't know how I'm gonna do that or what that looks like, but I've learned a lot over the last 10 years. I've come to understand a lot about myself and about God and about how to move forward in spite of these things. I still have a responsibility to help these Marines.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Resilience Show, and today's a super special day for the show because we are gonna take a break from the norm and talk about something that's very important to me, and that's the Mighty Oaks Foundation. If you guys don't know, my wife and I founded Mighty Oaks in 2011. It's been really the last 14 years of my life has been dedicated to Mighty Oaks. And if you see, if you're watching right now, I have the Mighty Oaks polo shirt on. And this show, the Resilience Show's primary beneficiary of that as a charity is Mighty Oaks. And so guest today is Jeremy Stalnecker. Jeremy Stalnecker is the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Mighty Oaks Foundation, has been at Mighty Oaks Foundation early on. I consider him a co-founder along with me. He came on about a year and a half into Mighty Oaks and came the second what we call it now today, legacy program. It wasn't called that back then.
Fight Club back in the old days.
Fight Club back then. Yeah, became the second program and then never left. And now he's the CEO, which is not the first time he was CEO. There's a history there, and we'll cut through all that today. But I really wanted to, at least once a year, for the Resilience Show to pause from normal programming, talk about Mighty Oaks as the charity that we primarily are going to push forward. And today, again, thankfully we have Jeremy on, and we could learn about the history of Mighty Oaks, the vision of Mighty Oaks, and how Jeremy's going to lead Mighty Oaks forward. But I also want to get a chance for people to get to know you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big transition for me. I was the CEO of Mighty Oaks, and I stepped down from leadership in order to focus on where I felt not only my gifts and talents were, and I'm patting myself in the back here to say gifts and talents is what I'm good at. But
we all have them.
We all have them. Yeah. I mean, for me, my gifts and talents are: I love speaking, I love writing books, I love doing this podcast, I love going to other people's podcasts and media, and historically at Mighty Oaks, that's where I've been the most impactful, and not just managing everyday stuff at Mighty Oaks, and other people are really good at that. You're one of them, and so I just reached a crossroad to where it was like time to make that transition. Is something you and I talked about for years.
Sure.
And now we're here, and I'm in a blessed position to be able to have people that I trust and have confidence in that could move Mighty Oaks forward. And you are the right guy for that position. And so today I want everybody to get a chance to know you.
Yeah.
And not just know about Mighty Oaks, but know you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, this is a fun conversation. We have, for those who aren't familiar, I guess, we've done a lot of this kind of media together.
Yes.
I mean, we've had two other podcasts, I think, where we
had the
co-hosted them, right?
Situation Report we hosted together on
the Mighty Oaks show for a lot of years. We did that, and so we've done this a lot. But yeah, I don't think ever really talking about my story or even my background really. So yeah. Thank you.
Before we get into your story, just to catch everyone up, and I think I just said it right. Like we just did this transition phase, but right now, Mighty Oaks is not just in this transition phase of you and I, like you be handing off the baton of CEO to you. It's in a really big growth phase. And it's so it was a point to where we had to address something like this. And right now, for those that know about Mighty Oaks, I'll let Jeremy give a kind of overview of what we do, the 4 things that we do at Mighty Oaks, but all 4 of those things in a growth phase. So can you share like what are the 4 things that Mighty Oaks really focuses on?
Yeah, so you can kind of trace this historically for Mighty Oaks. We started off as what we would call now recovery. Again, back in the olden days, we called it the Fight Club. It was it worked out really well in the early days until people started showing up ready to fight. We weren't about that.
They attributed my MMA background to the Fight Club.
And so in the early days of Mighty Oaks, we had a 5-day program, very similar to what we do now. In fact, that has not changed much. But we were very focused, you were very focused, and then we were very focused on combat veterans. And really, I was talking about this the other day with someone. I feel like in those early days, it was about reaching people not only like us, but the people we knew.
Yeah.
We wanted to help people that we knew personally, that we had served with and that we were involved with. And God had done this work in our lives, and we wanted to help other people understand that. But not just other people like broadly, very specific people, like the people we knew who needed help.
Yeah, through our network. And it was, for me, it was very much a pay it forward. Like, I felt God had given me a second chance. Some mentors came around me, and Steve Toth stepped into my life, and just family and friends, and I felt like, man, like I'm here because of other people. Yeah, I need to pay this forward, and now that's how it started for me. And just over the years, we've it's just grown, and then it morphed from veterans to we're like, hey. It's great to help veterans, but let's help people and then in transitioning. So help people out as they're transitioning. And the Marine Corps Wounded Warrior Battalion trusted us. And then we're like, let's get people before this happened. And that started the Resiliency program.
So that's the second part. So we were very recovery focused, which is, we deal with trauma, post-traumatic stress, a lot of trauma related to military service or that in the first responder community, but really it's trauma related to life that someone carries into the uniform. And then their service kind of exacerbates that. And so we're able to come alongside and help them really get their feet underneath them and move forward. So that's what we would consider recovery. You made this distinction today. We're in a meeting today, and you made this distinction. We're not talking about like alcoholism and those kind of things. There are great programs for that. What we're talking about is life recovery and getting people back on track. But then, yes, having the opportunity to say, what if we got out in front of this? Well, that's resilience. So how do we help people become resilient where they can deal with the traumas, the trials, and the difficulties of life, get knocked down, but have the tools already built in, have already made those good decisions so that when they get knocked down, they're able to recover, to bounce back. That is to be resilient.
Right.
And so that became, I don't even know how many years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, a big focus of effort for our organization, but specifically, I think, for you to be able to speak to active duty units, but young active duty military guys who hadn't had the bottom fall out yet and in other settings. So resiliency has become a big part of what we do, trying to get the right things built in before the bottom falls out so that they don't end up in our recovery program, which is, our legacy program.
Yeah, it's trying to prevent the problem.
Right.
I always say that, and I've heard this, I didn't token it, but an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
Right.
And one of my favorite things to do at Mighty Oaks previous to this transition and now, I'm still going to be involved in Mighty Oaks doing this, working in this capacity for the resiliency events. It is the resiliency events, going and speak in front of the troops. And it's going to be next year, this coming year is going to be 10 years at MCRD San Diego.
That's so crazy.
Which is Marine Corps Boot Camp San Diego. And then now I'm at Paris Island as well, which, I don't want to give this as credit to me. It's just credit to the organization and credit to leaders in the Marine Corps. We've been only, I'm one of only 2 people, myself and Phil Downer, that since Vietnam that gets to go speak to these Marine recruits and at Marine Corps Boot Camp and give them the resiliency tools. One of the reasons that everybody's listening to the show right now, the show is the Resilient Show. And the reason this show is named the Resilient Show is because of this being the last 10 years of my life is speaking on this topic, because what I truly believe fundamentally is that if you're in the military or not, if people will align their lives with the lives they were created to live and be resilient in these 4 pillars the military talks about: mind, body, spirit, and social. If you could be, mentally tough, have the right perspectives, be physically, take care of your body and keep your body healthy, socially, surround yourself with the right people, and then having a strong spiritual foundation for you and I through relationship with Jesus. If you could do all 4 of those things, you're going to be resilient to whatever life throws at you, and you're gonna be able to. Doesn't mean you're not gonna fall down. It means when you do, you're gonna be able to get back up. And so, from naming this show, that was like no better name for a show to what I think is most important in my life was the Resilient Show. And that comes from the speaking to about 500,000 troops over the last 10 years and doing that in the books you and I have written, like Path to Resiliency and Truth About PTSD and Not the Solution. Those books have been given out, upwards of between 350, 400,000 copies of those books.
That's crazy.
Now. And by the way, those books, that Jeremy and I put out, we sell them online, but they're totally free. If you go on our website, Is that where they go?
Yeah, go to the website and I think it says Mighty Oaks Library. It's something, you'll find it.
Yeah.
And they're all free downloads.
Yeah, you could download those 3 books for free.
Yeah.
And they're incredible reads, if I must say so myself.
Yeah, and they're short, which is nice. We always joke about, why they're short, but really they're short so you can digest them in an hour and a half. So and use them for other people.
So that's 2 of the 4 things.
Yeah, so resiliency. So, resiliency, very, very important. And then one of the things we've been doing for a long time, but we've really onboarded that as one of our efforts is what we call international programs. Probably 2016, I don't know, around 2016, a foreign military came to us and asked if we would help them learn a lot of the things that we've learned and understand how they could help the folks that they're helping. And what's sad but interesting, and it's an open door, is that militaries around the world are much more open to spiritual resilience and conversations around spiritual resilience than our military is. And so we've had open doors in a lot of places. And then as you went to Afghanistan and did the rescue effort really in Afghanistan, which was a big opportunity for, again, what we now call our international program, and then spent the last couple of years in Ukraine training chaplains and training other people really with the same things we do here, but doing that in other places. They don't have the same resources. They don't have the same tools. And we're able to take teams that can really line that out and help equip them to serve the people they serve. And so recovery, resilience, and then international now has been a big effort. It's one of those interesting efforts because our involvement in that ebbs and flows as the world is changing and opportunities arise. But it's been a big one, and your son Hunter has been very instrumental in developing that. Yeah.
I was super proud of the team that put the chaplaincy program together. I mean, if you can imagine, something like that happen in America, and I think Americans think nothing like that could ever happen here, but don't be so naive to think that.
Right.
When you think about like a draft and being conscripted, the people that are being drafted and conscripted are from neighborhoods and communities, and they're members of churches.
Yeah.
And so these people were pushed to the front line to defend their homes and their freedoms against the Russian invasion, and their pastors were like, "How do I go and serve the men from my community?"
Yeah, because their chaplains are pastors.
Yeah, they're pastors
of churches.
How do I go do that without being a hindrance?
Right.
How do I sleep in the woods? How do I poop in the woods?
Yeah.
How do I not become a burden in a medical crisis? So our team, and Hunter, my son, is part of that team.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've done over 30 trips at Mighty Oaks since the invasion. And Hunter's been on 13 of those. I've been on 10, but and we had some incredible team members who went out there and they took 300 of these pastors over multiple trips, 300 of these pastors, and trained them to be and certified them to be chaplains, go to front line and care for their people. And that's incredible.
Yeah.
So
it's an incredible opportunity, and they're so hungry for it, which has been, I think, a blessing for our team. Mm-hmm. We're not going somewhere where we're trying to insert ourselves in what's happening. We're being asked, can you please come and help us and equip us? And so Ukraine's been a big one. Mentioned Afghanistan. We've been to South America. We have a trip planned to Peru, I think, later this year. And so other opportunities are opening up all the time to help equip other folks around the world. I was in the Philippines last year and had the opportunity to work with the Philippine National Army, which is a federal police force, and just so many opportunities to share what we've learned. And so that's on our international side. And then the fourth area is advocacy. And again, advocacy is one of those things that, we had a huge open door for advocacy during a previous administration. I won't say more than that. You can figure out what that was, the previous administration. But opening the door, even through the VA, for faith-based programs and faith-based solutions to so many of the issues that our men and women who are transitioning out of the military or are out of the military. The VA, you talk about this a lot, gets a bad rap. Some of it's deserved, some of it's not. They do a great job. If the body's broken, they do a less good job with issues like post-traumatic stress and a lot of the mental health issues. However, there was an opportunity to address a lot of these through the Office of Faith-Based Solutions, through the VA, and this was a huge area we were advocating for, spoke to Congress, and there are great open doors there. Things have changed, but one of the good things that's changed is we have some incredible veterans who are now members of Congress.
Yes.
And so we've been able to help equip them, and in an ongoing effort, help equip them with data, with information that they can then take and, Derek Van Orden,
Corey Mills, Derek Van
Morgan
Orden,
Luttrell, others who are doing just an incredible job of pushing the ball forward on this. And, kind of in the background, we're able to equip them to have those conversations. And so that's been our advocacy effort.
I've been down there, and I'll say, during a previous administration, I'll say it was President Trump.
It's your show. I don't want to mess anything up. But.
Well, I mean, I'm just, I'm thankful President Trump, gave us the open door, and I was, helped with that as the chairman of the Veteran Service Alliance, and which was ended up being a White House coalition, and then and we were able to get the be a big part of getting the Prevents Bill signed,
that's right.
which is the president's roadmap to empower veterans in the national tragedy of veteran suicide. And for a president of the United States to, as busy as the president of the United States is, to make that a priority was very important to me at Mighty Oaks. And so we were able to include faith-based solutions in that bill, and that led to us getting the executive order signed, which worked with the Office of Faith and Community Initiatives. And so, those things are, you need advocates. And so people think, if you could think of this, you have the government, right? The government is a government organization. The VA is a government organization. Mighty Oaks is a NGO, a non-government organization. Right. You need people in the NGO side, non-government organization, to help educate and get behind and push initiatives to the government organizations. And Mighty Oaks has really had a platform to be able to do that. And even just this last year, I've testified twice before congressional committees. I say testified is probably the wrong word. Advised congressional committees, and it's been completely very influential.
What's interesting too, people listening sometimes will say, "Well, it's all about money, and the reason you would do that is for money." That's not the case, and I know there may be some money involved for other people. Mighty Oaks has not taken federal dollars.
No.
So advocacy for us is not about money. It's not about support. It's about opening doors for the men and women who need help to be able to have access to the help that they need.
In fact, there's a Senate bill, I think 785 was a Senate bill. We were the main champions of that bill. Right. I worked really hard to get a bipartisan consensus to champion this bill, knowing that we wouldn't, because of the way it was written, Mighty Oaks is a faith-based organization, would not get a penny from it. We were the main champions for it. Why? Because it helped veterans.
It helped veterans. And for us, the open door, veterans being shut out of faith-based solutions to so many of the issues they're having it's just not right.
No.
And so that's what advocacy is about. So when we look at, what are the 4 things Mighty Oaks does? We talk about this all of the time. Programs, our legacy program, that what we call recovery, that will always be our kind of main effort, if you will. But resiliency and the international programs and advocacy are so important to us, and the work that we've been able to do.
Yeah, I'm super proud that Smith & Wesson Firearms is a supporter of this show. I have been shooting Smith & Wesson firearms since I was a kid. This is one of America's most patriotic companies that has been around 170 years. So the Resilience Show is honored to partner with Smith & Wesson. I personally use Smith & Wesson firearms every day for my everyday carry. I keep Smith & Wesson firearms in my home for my home defense, and when I'm out on the range practicing, shooting, and staying sharp with my firearm skills. So check them out, and I hope you'll join me in carrying one of America's most iconic firearms. So now, you as the CEO, not me anymore.
Sure.
Karen Daily Bird, I get to have fun and go out and speak to the troops and do the resiliency stuff and build relationships and help support Mighty Oaks from different platforms I have. Yeah. And I could thank you for that. But you lead this now. So how did you, obviously I know how it worked at Mighty Oaks.
Yeah.
How'd you get there? Like, a couple of things about your background is, you're a Marine Corps infantry officer. You're an infantry commander. Served in Iraq. In combat in Iraq, and that is what opened up your heart to being part of this mission of Mighty Oaks. But I don't think too often we've talked about how you grew up, why you became a Marine, why you became an officer, why'd you choose that route, and what led you on this journey to be the CEO of Mighty Oaks.
Yeah. So. I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. My parents, and they're very conservative. My dad's a pastor for a long time, about 35 years. And so that was the environment that I grew up in, but it wasn't a military environment. It wasn't, I have two uncles that served kind of Vietnam era. My grandfather at 17 years old went to Europe in the Army, World War II. But the military was never something we talked about. It wasn't part of our family history. But my dad, being a very conservative Christian, was very pro-America and definitely instilled those principles of you need to serve something bigger than yourself and serve your community. And I remember when I was a kid getting a book that was written to boys in the 60s. It was a book my dad found at his parents' house. He was cleaning some things out and he gave it to me. I was 11 or 12 years old and read that book, and it was all stories of Congressional Medal of Honor recipients from World War II, but it was written in story form. And so it's, it's really exciting, but you start to get these thoughts of I could live for something bigger. I could do something bigger. About the same time, a couple started attending our church, the church that my dad pastored, and they were at the time, probably their late 60s, early 70s. And Mr. Edwards was his name. And he was a World War II veteran, part of the island hopping campaign as a Marine. And my dad would take me over to his house and we'd sit there and he'd tell stories. And again, you don't know it, but kind of by osmosis, you're developing a heart for that, right?
Sure, yeah.
And really felt like that's what God wanted me to do. And I don't know why, but I think it was all of those things, those inputs. And I remember talking to my dad about that when I was 14. Dad, I really feel like God would have me, enlist in the Marine Corps is what I told him at the time. He said, you can do whatever you want to, and we'll support it, but we want you to go to college first. And so, the Marine Corps was never an option for me. To me, it was like, well, if you go in the military, you go in the Marine Corps. Everyone I knew that was in the military was in the Marine Corps. The stories I read were Marine, so I went to enlist in the Marine Corps. And he said, you need to go to college first. My parents are both very educated, but they both received their education kind of at night school and, over many, many years as adults working jobs and raising families. So it was important to them that, myself and my sisters went to college. So I did. Another family friend said, if you're going to go to college, you need to go through a commissioning program. There's some great commissioning programs. And so that's what I did. And I was commissioned out of college into the Marine Corps as an infantry officer in 1999. Did a traditional deployment to Okinawa, and then we ended up in Iraq right at the beginning of the war. The 1st Marine Infantry Battalion, I was with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, but that was the 1st Marine Infantry Battalion that went into Iraq, breached the berm from Kuwait going into Iraq, secured the southern objective of the country, and then made our way to Baghdad. Battle of Baghdad on April 10th was my battalion as well. So that was my combat deployment.
There's like this incredible video of you, you're talking to your Marines, and talking about all of these guys, because they wouldn't have had you probably wouldn't have had any Afghanistan veterans in your unit. So these are all first time in combat people, including yourself. And you're giving this we're about to go across this line and we're going to get in a fight and people are probably going to die. And and you're like 20.
I was 25 at the time.
25 years old, giving this speech to you're in charge of 75 Marines or so.
I had 84 Marines in my platoon.
Okay.
It was, I always joke, it's like having a youth group at church, because the vast majority of those kids were under 20.
Right.
So 18, 19 years old.
And you were only 25.
I was 25, and literally no one in our battalion, except for our battalion commander and one of the other company gunnies who was actually killed in combat in Iraq, had ever had any kind of combat experience. And they were both in Somalia. We had some Desert Storm vets, but none of them had been in combat. If you're familiar with Desert Storm. And so, literally 1,200 Marines in our battalion, no one had ever been in combat.
So what was that like? I've seen the video, right? But I never asked you this. Like, what were you thinking to give this speech? What was the morale of the guys like?
Yeah, I've been told a few times how impressive it was I could give an impromptu speech like that. I probably worked on that for about 4 months because I knew eventually that day would come. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't impromptu. Like I had worked through, I didn't know much, but I knew that if we crossed the line of departure and went into Iraq, that's an historical moment. And, I knew enough about history to know I've got to say something important and clear. And so I just wanted to charge those guys with how big this is, how important this is.
Can you summarize a little bit? Because I know people can look it up, but
I said something about, this is a historical moment. America has always been the watchman on the walls of world freedom, quoting President Reagan. Talked about our training and how we had been, we're prepared for this. Depend on your training, depend on each other. It wasn't, a deep speech or anything like that, but just wanted to reassure them we're ready for this, and whatever happens over there, we're ready for it, and we trained for it, and we're going to be okay. And I didn't have any experience really to back up what I was saying, but I believed it was true. And this is where history helps, is learning the stories of other men and women who have gone into situations very much like that, but with good training, we're able to execute. And that's what I wanted to convey and wanted to communicate. And so,
how'd the Marines respond?
It was,
I know a lot of
like Marines. I mean, they responded with an hoorah, and that's right. And we're going to get it done. I had one of the a unique opportunity with that platoon that I trained with them for about 2 years, which is a long time in infantry years to be with the same Marines for that long. And you do know a lot of those guys. And so we knew each other really well. We had a good bond of trust, and I think they trusted me to the extent that they could. Again, none of us had been in combat before, but we all knew each other's strengths and weaknesses and where we needed to be. We had good NCOs and staff NCOs. And so we were ready. And I think at the time, what I felt like was important was projecting that I'm confident that what we're doing is the right thing for the right reason, and we're going to be okay once we start moving. And they responded well to that. And it was that night we made that movement. It was supposed to be the next day, got moved up 12 hours, made a nighttime movement, and breached the berm and went into Iraq.
You talk about this a lot. We're in the age of this giant LCD screen behind us right now.
Yeah.
That time, 2003, there was, technology was a lot different.
No, it was very different.
And there was no FaceTime with your family or anything like that. Like, how long you talk about? I forget the time frame that you went without speaking to your wife.
Yeah, I had spoken to my wife. We had an AP reporter with us, and he had a sat phone. So I think during my entire 6 months I was there, I must have talked to her for 6 minutes, less than 10 minutes during that entire time. Yeah. And that was when he'd say, "Hey, call real quick" or something, and you're calling in the middle of the night. And so it was a different world. Even the vehicles we were in Humvees, but they were pulled off of shipping. They were put on ships in 1990 and waiting for this kind of event to take place. And so there was no armor. We put sandbags on the floor, sandbags on our seat, sandbags everywhere we could, and in front of even the glass and the windshield. We had an onboard computer on my vehicle. Mine was the only one. It went down even before we crossed the border. I was responsible for navigating the battalion, which again is 1,200 Marines, a lot of vehicles. And I did that with a Magellan GPS that I bought at Target before we left the United States. And I'd hold it out the window to get a signal. And then I had a map book. It was literally 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper bound in a book. And I would flip to whatever page it was and find that 6-digit grid and hold it out here and know we were in the right place, and we'd keep pressing. So yeah, very, very different. In fact, I've made the statement before, the war that I was involved in Iraq was very different than the war that those who came behind us were involved in. It was a completely different world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your podcast is March or Die.
Yeah.
You've written a book called March or Die, which is phenomenal, by the way. If anyone listening has not read March or Die, the book, get a copy, you get it on the Mighty Oaks website. But that March or Die mantra comes from, it comes from First Battalion, 5th Marines.
Yeah.
But it also comes from a moment that you tie that to a moment during the invasion.
Yeah.
I'd love to share that story.
Yeah. It's, I can give the long version, and I have, you can find that in other places, but it was April 1st. So we had been moving for a while. We had gone through the initial invasion and the initial engagements and all those things. We were making our way to Baghdad. We knew that would be our final mission, would be to get into Baghdad and secure objectives there. But on April 1st, early in the morning, we were given a warning order, which is kind of a be prepared to, we're getting ready to do this, to go to this bridge over the Saddam Canal. Everything was the Saddam something then. Saddam Canal, and go and secure the bridge. But our job was to get to the bridge, to stay on the near side. So there was a berm. On top of that berm was the bridge over the canal, and that continued on. That road was important, but that bridge was important. And so our job was to get there, to secure it so that other units could pass through. We were 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines was going to pass through and continue on. And so our job was to get there and hold it. But we were making a daytime movement, which was very unusual for us because, at no other time that I was in Iraq did we make a daytime movement like that. We believed at the time, and it was wrong, but we believed at the time that the Iraqi army didn't have night vision equipment. And so for us to move at night gave us the advantage. And so we moved at night all the time. This was a daytime movement because there was not going to be any enemy troops on the objective, because that's what intel told us.
Yeah,
it was terrible.
Who told you that?
Yeah, who told us that? And we believed it stupidly. So we believed that General James Mattis was going to send 1,200 Marines to an objective in the middle of the day that was unguarded, right? And it's like, looking back, that was ridiculous. No one believed that, but as we were told. So we made our way, and again, summing up the story, I was navigating for the battalion. We were stretched out over a few miles. So my vehicles, Jeremy Mahon was in the lead vehicle, Jeremy, and I was in the second vehicle. He was front security. I was behind him navigating, and we had the rest of our platoon. And we came to that objective, and as we were making our way to the bridge, came into a straightaway. Mortar rounds started to fall around us. They were going into the ground, so the shrapnel was contained, but they're going to the ground. But the first thing we hit, those mortar rounds were bad, but the first thing we hit, there was a machine gun position dug into the side of that berm, faced our direction. And so we had to engage that. We made our way through that. I draw 5 principles for resiliency from that whole engagement. And the first one is the biggest battles in our life happen when we least expect them. That day we were not supposed to get in a fight. In fact, we were going to secure an objective, not even to move through the objective. But that fight came, and so often that's what happens in life. When we talk about resilience, right? And we talk about being resilient, well, you have to understand that sometimes the biggest battles you'll ever face are the ones you didn't think were a possibility. And that day we had one of those. And so we hit that objective, hit that machine gun position. Again, I trained with these guys for so long that there wasn't a lot of conversation. We knew what to do. We had done these drills. And so we were able to deal with that machine gun position and neutralize that. But the mortar rounds kept falling, and so we had to move out of that kill zone, and we had to move on top of the bridge. We weren't supposed to be on top of the bridge, but I had to get to a different place. That's the second principle of resilience. You often, in light of what's happening around you, have to adjust to an ever-changing battlefield. Things change. Don't be surprised when they do. I've told this story 1,000 times. I forget what the phrase was. Things change. Don't be surprised when they do. And we have to change. In fact, again, I've made this statement that in life, so much of our ability to find success or to be successful is found in our ability to adjust to change. Successful people are people who can adjust to change. And we had to change. We had to get into a different place, and we did. We got on top of that bridge. I got 8 vehicles on top of that bridge, and it was good to change. It was bad to stop on top of the bridge because that was a kill zone. You talk about being on the X all the time, and we were truly in an ambush site. We were on the X, pre-planned target for those mortars. In addition to that, there was a ZSU 23-4 anti-aircraft gun on the other side of the bridge. That we became the threat. It wasn't helicopters flying over, it was us. So they started to spin our direction.
Like 4 barrels.
4 barrels, anti-aircraft gun.
Like 30 millimeter probably.
23 millimeter,
okay,
yeah. And it's kind of Russian era. Everyone who's ever watched a movie has seen this because it's the 2 guys and there's a hand crank, right? And they're spinning it around. But it was elevated for helicopters to come across the bridge, but now we're the threat. So we've got the mortar rounds falling around our vehicles, and then that anti-aircraft gun is probably 50 meters away is spinning our direction.
Guys, it's a crazy world. There's lots of things you have to protect out there. One of the things you must always protect is your eyes. Look, you have 2 of them. Once they're gone, you don't have another set. You can't get an eye replacement. So protect them, take care of them. I have used Gators eyewear for years, way before I met the company. I would wear them in the military. I'd wear them to shoot with. I'd wear them to skydive with. When I was going out and doing operations in Afghanistan, Ukraine, I always wore Gators because not only do they have what I believe to be the best ballistic lenses, but they have the aluminum frame, so after you would take a blast to the face, which no one ever does, the glasses wouldn't fall off. Other brands will have good ballistic lenses with a plastic frame. You take a blast, your eyes are protected, but the frame falls off, and now you're in the middle of maybe a secondary attack without any eyewear. Again, I hope no one finds himself in that situation, but protecting your eyes is so important, and beyond the physical protection of ballistic eyewear, the lenses in eyewear are so important for UV protection, Gators has some of the best styles, but they also have some of the best lenses when it comes to UV protection, polarization that allows you to see digital things. Like, for example, when I'm skydiving, if you just have polarized, you can't see the digital screen. They have polarization that allows me to see digital screens, maybe your iPhone or other digital type of optics for those who don't skydive. So many cool frames, cool pairs of glasses. And by the way, they have been the choice of military and first responders for a long time. 35 years in business and run by absolutely amazing people who I became friends with. So if you're looking for the best eyewear out there, made in America, Gators Eyewear is the choice for me.
So we're in a bad situation. I thought about this, thousands of times probably. The fact that a mortar round did not land on a vehicle or a Marine it's an act of God. You can call it whatever you want, but it's a miracle. We were in a pre-planned target. We were on the X, the middle of the X, and the rounds were falling between vehicles, between people. I mean, the percussion of that, you'd feel through your body. I had Marines get blown back onto their backs, but we didn't lose a Marine, didn't lose a vehicle. Those mortar rounds were falling, that anti-aircraft gun was coming our direction, and we started to engage it. But this is kind of the big principle of resiliency, and this is where march or die comes from. When you find yourself in the kill zone, when you find yourself in that position where the mortar rounds are exploding around you and your life, your situation is going from bad to worse, and you have that machine gun coming your direction, we think we have 1,000 different things we can do, but we don't. We have one of two decisions we can make. We can stay where we are and die. We can, but that's a decision we make, and that doesn't always look physical. A lot of times it's mental, emotional, relational, spiritual. We give up. We can stay where we are and die if we choose to do that, but the better thing to do is march. And you mentioned this came from Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, when I checked in as a second lieutenant. That was their motto, march or die, which is like Marine proof, right? Yeah. like this isn't complicated. You can march or you can die. Yeah. That's it. But that's it. And to me, that really is life. It's every day you get to wake up and make the decision. Am I going to stay where I am and die, give up, allow the enemy to have his way with me, or am I going to march, put one foot in front of the other and move out of the kill zone, get to a place where I can better impact this fight and this enemy that I'm dealing with? I get to make that decision, and there's a lot of power in that. And that day, thankfully, we did the right thing. Again, we had trained a lot. We were in a very bad situation that I'd gotten us into, but we got out of that kill zone, we marched, and then we were able to deal with the enemy. And when you find yourself in those situations of life, that's it. And that's become a mantra. It was the title of a book, title of my podcast, but it's become a mantra for my life is every day, that's it. Those are the choices. And there may be 1,000 different things you can do within those choices, different ways to march, but really it's about putting one foot in front of the other and continuing to move forward in spite of whatever obstacle you have in front of you. So that's where that came from. And, the book March or Die tell a number of stories, but that's the story that kind of is the linchpin that holds it all together. And that for me, it's not just, marketing or clever turn of phrase. It really is something I try to live out every day. Did
you hit all the points just now?
I summed up the points. I normally have 5. So,
I'm interested myself.
Yeah. The biggest fights in life come when you least expect them.
Okay.
You may not always get to pick the fight, but you get to pick how you fight. So at that machine gun position, we got to decide how we were going to fight. Don't be surprised when things change. And, success in any area of life is directly connected to how well you handle change. When you are in the kill zone, you only have 2 choices. You can march or you can die. And then the 5th one, which I sometimes include and sometimes don't, is leadership is the answer. Because when you make these decisions, we always think it's about us. But even being resilient, it's not about you. And I think back to that moment. I think back to a moment where I could have stayed there and allowed the enemy to win. But the decision to move, it didn't just impact me, it impacted, countless others.
Yeah.
And when we make the decision to stay where we are, to give up, to throw in the towel, that impacts us personally, but it impacts so many other people. So being resilient, we always think of it in our terms, but it's really not about us. It's about fully being what God has created us to be or called us to be, but it's about moving other people forward.
Yeah.
And it really is about putting one foot in front of the other. There's a superpower in just staying consistent and getting up every day and doing it again and again and again, because very talented people often don't live up to their potential. And so those for me are the five principles that I talk about when I tell that story. And, I can tell it in the 45 minutes context too, but it's just about continuing forward and just realizing this is where I am. I didn't ask for it, but here we are. I get to decide what I'm going to do now. The enemy gets a say, so I might have to adjust. Don't change who you are, but you need to adjust to an ever-changing battlefield, and then make the decision to march and understand you're taking other people with you. To me, that is kind of the word picture, the story that best encapsulates that principle or those principles of resilience.
Yeah, that's really good. You had a quick transition out after that. You get back from and not only a quick transition out, but a pretty radical shift in your identity of what you did for a living.
Yeah, came home from Iraq, and 30 days later, I was out of the Marine Corps. That decision had already been made, and the pieces were kind of put in motion. But out of the Marine Corps and working on a church staff. It was a church that we had been attending when I was in the Marine Corps, and it was a good situation. I don't have a Bible background or a Bible degree, but I was asked to come and lead projects and do some other things at the church, and I ended up doing all the ministry stuff, which is not what I anticipated doing.
Going from leading 84 infantry Marines in combat to being a church staff,
and trying to get volunteers to do what they signed up to do, and and I didn't realize it at the time, and this is something a lot of transitioning service members experience, but I did not understand how much my identity was tied to that uniform that I wore, to the rank that I had, to the title that I had, to the job that I had. And then for me, my whole life had been pointed toward not only military service, but service as an infantry Marine, hoping to go to combat someday. I did that. At that time in 2003, I was one of, few relatively who had done that. And now I felt very unimportant. I felt cast aside. I felt, very frustrated. I got very angry, and I took it out on everyone. My problem, what I was feeling, was everyone else's fault. And that meant a couple things. One, I started taking it out on the people I worked with, which is crazy on a church staff. If you've ever been on a church staff, or like these are the nicest people in the world, right? They didn't get into this to be yelled at by me, but I was sitting in a church staff meeting, and I'm like, this is stupid, and you guys are stupid, and you're the problem, right? I was coming out of the infantry world, and so that got me invited out of a lot of staff meetings. And then taking that frustration at church, which is crazy, and I take it home. My wife, I had 2 little kids at the time, and again, it was all their fault. I was very angry, throw things. I was a disaster. And I talk about this, and I'm not proud of it, but the fact that my wife stayed with me through that period of time is a testimony to her and her love for God and her belief that, God could do something with me. I never hit her, never hit my kids, but I did everything short of that, emotionally abusive and all those things. And then I would just kind of get in myself and leave. And Susanna, my wife, says, there were times that you went away and I didn't think you were coming back because of, I thought you would just, hurt yourself or take your life. And that was my transition. And meanwhile, I'm going through all of that. I'm counseling couples. I'm trying to help other people. And I sincerely was, but I was a complete disaster. About 12 months after I started that job, 11 months after I started that job, my pastor called me into his office and said, I love you, but I can't help you anymore. You either need to move on or you need to figure out what's wrong with you. And we weren't talking about post-traumatic stress or trauma or anything like that in 2003. It was just, I was just being a jerk to everybody. And we don't know why. You weren't like this before, but this is how you are. And so him confronting me, other people coming along and confronting me, caused me, first of all, to take responsibility for how I was behaving and the things I was saying and the way I was treating other people. And then it began a long process of me getting my feet back under me and starting to understand some of my issues. I would say it took me a year to start moving forward. My wife would tell me, it would say it took about 10 years. I was on staff there for 5 years. Part of me healing, if you will, was kind of walking away from the Marine Corps and the Marines that I knew. I didn't stay in contact with anyone. I couldn't look over my shoulder anymore. I couldn't think about it anymore. And so I just really leaned into the work that I was doing. I became a pastor. I was on staff there for 5 years. I became the pastor of a church, a senior pastor. And Susanna, my wife, does say and has said, there were times when I was preaching that she would sit there and she'd get so angry because she would hear what I was saying and understand that I was not living that at home. Times, and she's told me this recently even, where she would pack the kids up, put them in the car, and get ready to leave. And she'd get into the car, but she wouldn't drive away, and then she'd bring them back inside. And this happened for a while. So, it was about a 10-year process, which is interesting now looking back, because it was 10 years after I got out of the Marine Corps that I met you, that I had that first meeting with those Marines in West Cliff, Colorado, in that first program.
Yeah, let's talk about how that came about.
Yeah.
The first, so for those listening, the first session at Mighty Oaks was like, okay, here we go. This is what we're going to do. I'd already been doing Mighty Oaks for about a year. And my original plan of how I was going to do it wasn't very effective. So I'm like, we're going to do a 5-day camp.
Yeah.
And it's going to be off this curriculum.
Yeah.
A long story how the curriculum came up, which is a super interesting story I can share one day. But it's 5-day curriculum.
Yeah.
And so that first session I did, I pretty much exhausted my list of veterans
Right.
who were willing to come.
Right.
So the second session, I'm like, now I have to get people I don't know, people,
Right.
And just so happened Jeremy Mahon, one of your Marines and MMA fighter, who's a friend of both of ours.
Yeah.
Jeremy Mahon reached out to me and said, "Hey, I don't know what it is you're doing at this Mighty Oaks thing, but I'd love to do a reunion for my Marines from 1-5."
Yeah.
And I said, "Man, I will facilitate that for you,
Yeah.
but I need you guys to come through my program."
Yeah, right.
And so it was the first time and only time in history of Mighty Oaks that we had an entire unit come to Mighty Oaks at one time.
Yeah.
And
you swore you'd never do it again.
I'd never do it again.
Yeah.
And you just so happened to be the platoon commander
Yeah.
for that unit.
Yeah. Jeremy Mahon, who I haven't talked to, you were working with Manny Silva, and he was in my platoon too. And so, but I hadn't talked to those guys since I left the Marine Corps. And Jeremy reached out on Facebook, I think, and said, "Hey, there's this guy, he's doing this thing. I don't know what it's about, but he's a Christian and you're a Christian. And I think you should meet him and come up with us and do this thing." And so I did. And that was the first time anyone had reached out to me. First time I had talked to any of those guys in almost 10 years.
Well, I remember getting a phone call from you. I'm standing on the back porch of my, like, pacing when on the phone, like I always do. And you're like, "Explain what this is." Cause you're like, "Yeah, I was a Marine and I was part of Jeremy's, but I'm also a pastor.
Yeah.
Explain to me what this is."
Yeah.
You're in your typical skeptical sense of skepticism.
Yeah,
those
sure.
who don't know Jeremy.
Sure.
And you're like, "What is this?" And so I tried to explain the best of what I thought we were doing at Mighty Oaks, and maybe it was enough to convince you to come.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but
No,
but you came.
It was.
You showed
I
up.
came. Yeah. And it was. I mean, obviously, I haven't stopped doing that since then. So it was life changing, life altering. But it was interesting. Isn't a strong enough word, but it impacted me in a number of different ways. One was just watching how it unfolded, being in a room full of guys who really could care less about God, but teaching what we teach now, basically. But teaching it all from a faith perspective and helping, combat veterans, because of the combat connection, are willing to listen to each other, even if we don't necessarily agree on what we're talking about. So just watching that whole thing unfold, it was fascinating to me. I hadn't been in an environment like that. I mean, I don't think there's another environment like that,
Right.
even now, but there certainly wasn't then. So just being a part of that, and then getting to know you and hearing your story and your family's story. We talked a lot about faith and stepping out and what that looks like then, and that impressed me. But then, probably I don't know, maybe the biggest life-changing thing that happened was, and where we had that program, there was that big open fireplace upstairs, and myself and those Marines who I'd served in Iraq with sat there one night. It was toward the end of the week. I don't know what night it was. And I started to hear stories about Marines who went to Fallujah and died, and these other things that happened in the lives
These were your Marines.
of the Marines that I'd served with, and that were in my platoon. And so I'd always been kind of proud of the fact that I brought these guys home, and we went to combat, we did this thing, and then we came home, we trained well. It was this amazing success. Well, then 10 years later, I'm hearing about suicides and broken homes and destroyed lives and combat deaths. And I realized, I mean, for the very first time, I realized I still have a responsibility to help these guys. I don't know how I'm going to do that or what that looks like, but I've learned a lot over the last 10 years. Even as a Christian, I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot. I've come to understand a lot about myself and about God and about how to move forward in spite of these things. I still have a responsibility to help these Marines. And so when I say for me, it was a very specific group of people. I wasn't even then thinking about like, how do we reach everybody? It was like, how do I help these guys? And, Mighty Oaks was the vehicle. We met that week and we connected that week, and
I'm like, help. I need help.
Come back. You needed help, and I think opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I think it was, God brought those two things together at the right time. And that session, you had instructors, but they were from another program, another organization's program, because you needed instructors. And it was the next session a few weeks later, a month later, that, it was you, me, and two other guys that you knew, Toby and Rusty.
Yeah.
And so that, really was kind of you taking on your own team. And
now we have
we
have 50 instructors at Mighty Oaks.
Yeah, we've got about 50 instructors, and we're constantly turning them over. And
it was the four of us. Like, it would take me a week to recover after those programs.
It was rough.
It took me a week to recover.
And we didn't have a training program, so we taught every class and we led every discussion and we did everything. And it was crazy looking back. We would have a class start at like 7 a.m. and then we'd have breakfast, and then we'd do other stuff, and then we did like 2 half days of activities. Like, it was insane.
Finish at midnight.
It was insane. Finish at midnight. Yeah. We'd do testimonies, and testimonies would take like 15 hours, go into the middle of the night. It was insane looking back, but we all did it. And again, for me, it came from that sitting around that fire with those guys, and I think God really impressing, like, you still have a job to do, not just this church you're pastoring, but ministering to these guys.
So that was 10 years ago?
2012.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 12 years ago.
It's been a long time. Yeah. I want to say it was, I remember Halloween. It was October, last week of October, 2012.
Guys, if you need a red dot for a pistol, if you need a scope for a rifle, if you need binos, rangefinders, even cool close, anything you need in the realm of optics, you have to check out Vortex Optics. Before I chose to lock arms with Vortex to be a sponsor for this show, I went down and spent time with them, toured their facility, met some of the owners of the company, Shamus, the vice president there. Amazing human beings, just great people. These are great people who build some of the best products in the realm of optics. And not only that, they provide incredible training at their facility in Madison, Wisconsin. They have the nicest range that I've ever been to, and incredible training there. So they're not just providing products, they're providing training and services on how to use those products. I love Vortex Optics. It is my optic of choice, and you can check them out at vortexoptics.com. Through that time, eventually you had to make a decision. You came on Mighty Oaks full time. Been part of a lot of the curriculum development and authored a lot of the books and resources, and really built a lot of the infrastructure of how Mighty Oaks runs. And today Mighty Oaks is not where we started. I mean, Mighty Oaks is we have almost 40 full-time employees. We have 50 instructors that teach at Mighty Oaks. We'll put 1,000 people through that resiliency program, or close to it, this year. We'll speak to 70 to 100,000 active duty troops, and we'll be all over the world doing international stuff. And in DC, in the advocacy side, all these things are happening. And Mighty Oaks is just really God just continued to put his hand on it, and blessing and created opportunities. And so, I think was important for people to know where you came from to be the CEO and why you're the CEO. You came from the very beginning, and you've seen the ups and downs. You've seen the, lots of change over the years and development and struggles. So, why there's so many, you're such a talented, human being, and there's so many places that you could be, why is it you still after 12 years choose to do this?
Well, I mean, I hope it's because this is where God wants me, and I do my best. And I would say, myself, my wife, we do our best to constantly ask the question: are we exactly where God wants us to be? Mm-hmm. And so, asking that question means that whether things are going well or not so well, or there's ups or downs or whatever, it doesn't matter. That's not how you make your decision. You ask the question: is this where God wants me to be? And specifically, and this is me as a Christian person, specifically, I have to ask the question, am I in the very best place possible to communicate the gospel to the most people possible? Mm-hmm. The gospel to me, to us, is not only life changing, but it's eternity altering. It's what God has called us to do. That's the focus of my life and my family's life. And so asking that question all of the time, where are we able to most affect the greatest number of people with the gospel message? And, that looks different now than it did 10 years ago. I'm not teaching all the classes. I'm not constantly verbally communicating that message to our students, but now working to do the best possible to equip the people that we have that are doing that. Mm-hmm. And so, if God showed another way or something, I guess, I want to be in a place where I'm willing to pursue whatever God sets in front of me and us. But the answer to that question for the last 12 years has been Mighty Oaks. And I mean, this and other people don't, but I was pastoring a church and we were growing. We bought property, developed buildings. I mean, a lot of good things were happening. Yeah. But that was the same question I was asking then is, and it was my wife that really kind of framed that for us. Is this the very best place for us to communicate the gospel to the most people, or is it Mighty Oaks? And at the time it was Mighty Oaks, and right now it's Mighty Oaks. And so as long as God continues to open those doors and provide, that direction and those opportunities. We were asked today, you and I were in a meeting, is Mighty Oaks still gospel focused, And again, for people that aren't Christians, that may not mean anything to you, but what it means to me is, do you still believe that God is the creator, that he has a plan, that through Jesus, his son, he provided the forgiveness of sin and the opportunity to have a relationship with him, right? Are you still gospel focused? That was the question we were asked today. And that's a resounding yes. That's never changed in spite of what we do and the other things that we do. And I was asked the other day, will anything change at Mighty Oaks? Well, it's going to look different. It's looked different since the beginning. It looks different, but
the mission's never
But
changed.
As long as I'm a part of it, the mission is not going to change.
Well, Mighty Oaks is a mantra. For those who don't know it, saving lives, restoring families, and changing legacies. And then we always add the tagline, you pretty much need to see it, for eternity. For eternity. And that's something that I think it just came out in speech. And I never stopped saying it. Now it's made its way into our nomenclature. But saving lives, restoring families, and changing legacies for eternity. And that's very fundamental to everything I do. It's the mantra from Mighty Oaks, but everything I do, like, am I doing things that's going to save lives, restore families, and change legacies for eternity? And so I, in this transition, it's funny you mentioned that, that's the same question I have to ask myself in this transition, where you're taking a CEO role because you believe and that's where God wants you right now to make the most impact for sharing the gospel. For me, I have that same question, where can I make the most impact? And it's not being in a CEO role. Ironically, we're both sitting here having the same thought, the same conversation, but our lives are in different places. And ironically for me, where I make the most impact is going out and speaking, and the opportunities of, last year I had 497 requests to speak, and I could pick which events I speak at to be able to reach the most people. It's going on media outlets and podcasts. I mean, we were on I was on Sean Ryan's show just recently, which was watched by millions of people. And we had 200 applications from Mighty Oaks applicants. We raised, thanks Sean Ryan, if you're listening, by the way, we raised $300,000 from Mighty Oaks from being in that one podcast and having 200 applicants come in. That's like, that's a big ROI for where I put my energy. And I love the writing aspect. I'm really enjoying being an author, and I love this show. And I feel like on this show, like, I get to, reach a lot of people and have conversations like this. So, I can't do that and be the CEO. So just reached a point to where I couldn't. And so, but also for the benefit of Mighty Oaks, which is still my heart and soul, and why this episode is dedicated to Mighty Oaks, is me doing those things puts me in the best position to give the most support to Mighty Oaks, to empower you as a CEO and the whole team of Mighty Oaks, who's able to be in the trenches with the guys. Like, it all works together really, really well. So, if anybody listening is confused about that at all, or questions at all, like, this is what we collectively believe the best scenario is for the mission of Mighty Oaks. And I feel really good about it. I'm excited about it for me personally. You and I are very different human beings, which we've known for the whole 12 years you've been here. And so, for me, it's going to be, why is he doing it like that? And that's I think the same thing with everybody doing, when you're in transition, you have something you're so passionate about. And it's just part of transition. But, I have the utmost confidence in not just you. I mean, yes, you, but we just have such an incredible team.
We have an amazing team, and
Brandon, like Kunith, as a national programs director, and
our leadership team is amazing. And this is one thing that I think people may not understand looking from the outside in, is that we have an amazing team. This is not about any one person. This is not. We have at any given time, we could have as many as 3 sessions going on at a time.
Yeah,
I mean, that's, people don't understand what's involved in that, but that's
logistically complex.
It's logistically insane that we're able to do that, and we do it well because we have an incredible team. Yeah. We have supporters that come along and financially make it possible. We have team leaders who have gone through years of training to get to the place where they can do what they do. We have, you mentioned almost 40 full-time employees, but then we have another 60 plus people who come along and help us at any different time, at any time during the year. And so Mighty Oaks is not, it's not, you or me, it's this network of people that God has connected to accomplish that work. Yeah.
We have 100, I think our email subscriber list, 180,000
people. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Over $7 million a year in programming. It's incredible. And,
it's incredible.
Been an honor to be a part of it, and going to continue to be part of it for the rest of my life. For us, with this show, this is again something I want to do every year.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight a piece of your commitment to this is you recently. Well, I would say recently. So you do a couple of things hobby-wise. I remember a few years ago they were doing a media piece on me, and they were like, "Okay, what are the things you want to do?" And I'm like, skydiving, jiu-jitsu, shooting. They did all this stuff, and they're like, "Jeremy, we want to do one on you. What do you do?" And you're like, "I drank coffee and I read my Bible." And you're like, you got to spice it up.
Got to do something else.
Yeah, you got to spice it up to be a little more interesting. You like at the point I think they said you were like the least interesting man alive or something like that. But vote of videos guys, really cool people. But since then, you come a long way.
I've always done other things. I mean, I've surfed for a long time and done some other things, but
I do remember you've always really enjoyed surfing and being out.
But I mean, I've always been kind of the more introspective.
When I get brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
under Carlson Gracie, and I've enjoyed that. That's been a great blessing. Just with, I mean, you got me involved in that, but my kids and just the network of people, it's been pretty amazing. But
you started running.
And then running. Yeah, I've been running forever. But I just haven't been as dedicated to it as I have been in the last couple of years. So it's been a journey the last couple of years. I
remember when you first said, I think I'm going to start running long distance, and you said ultra marathon. I'm like, ultra marathoning, that's like,
it's pretty long.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think you were going to stick with it, but you did, and then you did like a couple 100 milers.
Yeah,
we did. I know you did.
I've done a bunch of 50Ks, 100K, 100 miles, a whole bunch of marathons. Yeah, I don't know what my oldest Maggie, she said I'm going through a midlife crisis, but I did get to a point where I'm like, I can't do this forever.
Right.
And so if I'm going to do this, then now's the time. And so that was a few years ago now, and it's been fun. I don't know how much longer I'll continue to do it, but.
Well, you called me and you said, I got this crazy idea. What do you think about it? And you said you were going to run 22 marathons in 22 days and call it the 22 for 22, kind of signifying the kind of iconic, like, sadly iconic 22 suicides a day. So 22 for 22 and run those 22 marathons. And I'm like, it sounds crazy, but I think it'd be really cool. And you did it. You did 22 marathons in 22 days.
I was hoping you'd talk me out of it, and then you didn't. So I asked my wife, and she didn't. So then I asked Michael Cameron, who's here. And he not only didn't talk me out of it, he said it was an amazing idea. So I couldn't get anybody to talk me out of it. So we went for it, and did that at the end of last year. Started on, I think, October 22nd, 21st maybe, but ended on Veterans Day, and that was 22 days out. So it was pretty amazing. The crazy thing is, I think I was in 7 cities in 5 states during that 3 weeks. And
you didn't just do it from the convenience of your home.
No,
and you did speaking events.
I do speak, throughout the year I speak, but for whatever reason, right around Veterans Day, I spoke several times in different states. And so you're trying to navigate, like, okay, I need to get there, first of all, fly there. And then I need to go do the speaking event, but I've also got to get at the 26.2 in. And so it was a crazy, crazy way to do it. But I'm glad I did it. and I will never do it again.
Yeah,
but
glad it's over.
But it was good.
So
576 miles.
76 miles
Yeah.
total. And
Yeah.
did it as a awareness campaign through Mighty Oaks. And you know, I know it's not out yet, but you know, kind of set the stage for those who want to see it when it comes out. It's a documentary that was done. Jim Clock and some our good friend Jim Clock and some other folks in the film industry did a documentary. It's called 22 for 22 is a documentary. Right?
Yeah, 22 is just
22.
Just the working title. I don't know. Yeah,
22.
I don't know where they'll settle, but I think 22.
But yeah, if I follow Mighty Oaks, get on the Mighty Oaks newsletter. You know, it will come out, and it'll be a documentary you can watch. It's really incredible story of Jeremy's journey, and you know the commit of running 580 miles in 22
and it's
days.
not just about running, and that's something you and I talked a lot about. Is running is a vehicle like everything else. You know, nobody cares about running, but it serves as a vehicle to tell a story, and we had some great interviews in there, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Ran the Marine Corps Marathon as part of that, which was incredible, and then ran the Charlotte Marathon as part of that, which was also fun, and then a lot of other stuff that we did. And then we did Mighty Oaks did our own marathon here in Conroe, Texas. So it's a lot of fun.
So I know because I'm in the circle of Mighty Oaks. But what are some upcoming things from Mighty Oaks that we could let everyone be aware of?
We always have programs going on, so that's something that people need to be aware of. And programs are those week-long, those 5-day programs. Man, we've got something going on all the time, which is awesome. In August, we have your book launch. So that's something that
Museum of the Bible,
August
13th. You could go on the Mighty Oaks website and find a link to it. But myself and Kaylee McEnany be speaking. You'll be emceeing it. Are you still emceeing it?
I guess.
So
I didn't know I was emceeing it, but I'll be emceeing it. So we'll do that.
Nine Line is sponsoring it. Nine Line Apparel, veteran-owned company, and they're putting it on for us. Museum of the Bible, the Green family. My book publisher Thomas Nelson is it's if you haven't been to Museum of the Bible, it's worth going just for that. You can buy my book on Amazon, right? But
it's an amazing venue. An amazing venue. There'll be some great people there. So that's happening in August. In October, looking down the road a little bit, we have our gala with Terry Crews. It's coming up.
President Camacho.
So that's happening as well, and then a lot of other speaking events and things. Our newsletter is a good place to get that information, or any of the Mighty Oaks socials where that stuff's announced. There's always something going on.
Your podcast
is called March or Die. And if you go to marchordie.com, that's the website where all the archived episodes and the podcast is there. I have guests on about 50% of the time. The other 50% is me talking about principles of resiliency, how to move forward in spite of what's happening in life. And those all my guests kind of speak into that vein as well, all from a faith perspective. So marchordie.com is where you can find that, but it's also on Spotify and any other podcast platform.
And any of Jeremy's books, you could just go right on Mighty Oaks' website. All that's
all
there.
And
well, awesome, man. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I think we covered a lot. Covered a lot. No, thank you. It's fun to talk.
Well, cool. Like I said, guys, we'll be doing this like once a year. I want to dedicate an episode to talking about Mighty Oaks Foundation. It is the premier charity for this show, and in fact, it's going to be all that you'll see it in advertising, so you see it all year. But once a year, we want to just pause and talk about this and how you can be involved. If you are a veteran or first responder and you are in need of help and you're struggling, or you know someone that's struggling, you don't need to do it alone. You're never created to do it alone.
Right.
Reach out and get help. There's lots of places to go, but one place you could count on is Mighty Oaks. You can go to mightyoaksprograms.org, apply for a program. It is a simple process. We keep it simple intentionally, and no strings attached. We'll pay for everything, including if you need help getting to the program, we'll buy you a plane ticket. Literally no strings attached. A grateful nation of people love you and care for you and make that possible through donations and support. And speaking of that, if you are not a veteran or first responder and you want to support, Mighty Oaks needs support. We can't do it without a grateful nation of patriots who love our warriors. So you could go to mightyoaksprograms.org and donate there. It's a phenomenal organization to support financially. The resources that go directly to helping these warriors, and it's a 501c3 tax deductible charity. And all the information is on the website. But we definitely would appreciate anybody's support make this happen and serve our warriors and, you know, to care for those who served us. And so mightyoaksprograms.org. That's it for now, and we'll see you next week. I want to thank all the sponsors who make bringing the Resilient Show to you possible. Smith & Wesson Firearms, Vortex Optics, Gators Eyewear, Allied Wealth, Midas Gold Group, BioPro Supplements, BioAccelerator Stem Cell Therapy. And for those of you who don't know, the Resilient Show proudly supports our warriors and families at Mighty Oaks. So thank you, and thank you to all the sponsors who make this show possible. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Resilient Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you hadn't already, please click subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We have so many amazing guests scheduled and you don't want to miss it.